Good morning, friends, and welcome to the Biblical Perspective. We're right here at the very end of January 2022. So much has happened this week. Some of you, again, are going to fuss at me saying you need to do one of these every day instead of just once a week. It's too much stuff to cover. And I understand the problem. Well, let's get right to it as we look first at the Word of God today. What in the world's going on? Well, it's something that I believe Jesus predicted for these days. It's found in Matthew chapter 24, where the word lawlessness pops up again. He says in Matthew 24:12, because lawlessness will multiply. Think about what multiplication does. Something that's bad, like a virus or something. All of a sudden, it begins to get out, it begins to have a life of its own, and it multiplies through society. Then you have a problem. Well, Jesus says, because lawlessness will multiply, the love of many will grow cold. Apostle Paul even predicts that in the end there will be a man that seems to promote lawlessness. He calls him just that, the man of lawlessness, the lawless one. Some call this the Antichrist. Well, in either way, you're looking at someone who takes those laws that have been in place and throws them away. Now, that's something scary to look at when we live. I'm in the United States of America. For some of you who are watching me in other countries, we live in what's called a constitutional republic. The law of the land is supposed to be our constitution, its Bill of Rights, its amendments. Yet that in itself has been thrown in the trash by our current administration. A lot of those things we have long considered truths, even things, simple things like your own medical privacy, all being thrown to the wind. And especially, we've seen it happen this week in so many things. I've got half a dozen different disastrous things to talk about. Let's get to some of these right now and look at this in light of the fact that we're being set up for a time in which it's going to be completely crazy. It looks that way, of course. And Jesus said that's the way it's going to look when he returns. So keep that in mind. First of all, we had that story of the body cam footage of those police officers who were there at a New York airport where in the middle of the night when the airport was closed, in flies a jet full of illegal immigrants. And this is the type of thing was going on all over our country. May still be going on somewhere. Buses, planes, all being filled with illegals who are being shipped all over the country from our southern border. What is anybody thinking with all of this, especially during a COVID epidemic? Oh yeah, they're concerned to let you get into the local Applebee's if you don't have a vaccination card, but yet they're releasing people with COVID all over the country. And does any of this make sense? Does it make sense to break our own immigration laws? Yet we've seen time and time again that our southern border is now a joke and we have a disaster there. It's very much like the old Trojan horse picture. Remember how Troy was finally conquered when the Trojan horse was let into the gates? Oh, friends, this is far worse than a Trojan horse. We've just opened the gates in broad daylight and are allowing those who we have no idea what their background is, no idea what their purpose is for coming here. And we just kind of look at the crowds and say, oh, wow, are these all just oppressed people and we need to give them a safe place to go? Can you do that with everyone in the world in your country? What other country in the world does this? Throws their borders open. It's pure lawlessness. There is no law regarding our border anymore. And I feel so sorry for some of you who've tried to obtain legal citizenship here and you've jumped through all the hoops. You're doing everything you're supposed to. And yet, these other folks just are given free pass to come in and get free health care, free everything they want with no responsibility whatsoever. It is the basis of lawlessness. And it's for that reason that some have called this week for the impeachment of President Biden. Well, I've already done that, but it doesn't matter. My voice doesn't matter in this regard at all. But there need to be more voices to say we have a lawbreaker in the White House. He can't even respect the laws of his own country. Why should he be running it? Well, something else I want you to notice. We had this week, when it comes to covering these issues, we had some 10,000 people march for life in Washington, D.C., had thousands more marching against mandates. What did the legacy media do? They either ignored it or called some of these people enemies of the state and terrorists. Oh, my goodness. Are you serious? There's just a concerted effort built around, I think, trying to demonize people who have any viewpoint outside of the viewpoint held by the not just the mainstream media, but all the political operatives that are involved there. What is all this about? Well, we'll find out here shortly. And then in Canada, our northern neighbor, what have we got? Truckers protesting across the country. A number that is gathered to protest the current government's policies that's literally bigger than the military in Canada, a group that's that large. And Justin Trudeau can do nothing but demonize these people and say they have the wrong opinions. Well, they're on their way to Ottawa to try to make their case why you need to step down. Because you see, Trudeau is also one of those lawbreakers. Here's a government in Canada that has had the audacity to jail pastors for having church. Yet, over and over again, it seems like they're clueless about what is happening in their own society. And they keep putting their people through some of the most horrific rules, regulations, all handed down from the top, not passed appropriately through the Canadian legal system. Folks, you're dealing with the same kind of lawlessness that we are here in the United States of America. And then we've got, because of that, these mandates that say the reason the truckers are protesting, well, if you haven't been vaccinated, you can't even drive a truck. You can't cross the border. And with all the shortages going on, they're putting all these restrictions on truckers. You know, the ones we used to brag about back at the beginning of the pandemic, truckers are keeping us going, God bless them. And, you know, oh no, now you're demonized unless you fit into the right narrative. What is all this about? Well, as we keep moving through this, I think you'll understand what it's about when I talk about this next issue. Number three, big pharma vaccines have now been discovered to have little effect on this new variant of COVID, Omicron. Little, almost nothing. But the sales pitch keeps on coming. In fact, some of you even talked to me this week. I don't want to start arguments with folks, but, well, you know, I had a relative that got COVID, but it wasn't very bad. And I think it's because they had the vaccine. Folks, do you remember the sales pitch? If you let these, and it's got to be one of these big three pharma companies, and if you go outside of here, you know, then there's the China Vax and AstraZeneca if you're in Great Britain. So there's only about five that are supposedly big deal. They're approved, and they're the ones you should take. Now, if you'll take one of these, you can get back to normal life. You'll be protected. You won't get COVID-19. You'll be fine. Just take the shot. And you did that. And guess what? It didn't work. It was a lie. So then you have to turn the narrative around and blame unvaccinated people. Herd immunity was supposed to be 50%, then 60%, 70%. No, it's 80%. No, we've got to get everybody vaxxed. And if they won't get vaxxed, they must be an enemy of the state. Where is this narrative coming from? I'll tell you exactly where it's coming from. All you have to do is turn on one of those morning legacy media shows, and you'll see it. Sponsored by Pfizer. Sponsored by Pfizer. Pfizer is your sponsor this morning for, you know, the big money from pharma has gone to the depths of corruption in our own country, as well as many others. The pressure is there. You've got to support certain companies, the ones that are making the big bucks. Friends, this is what it's about. It's all about the money. It's about the money. It's about the money. It's about the money. How do you know? All you've got to do is follow the trail of the money, and it goes everywhere. Remember the sales pitch? Well, now it's gotten down to, well, if you've gotten vaccinated, at least it might keep you out of the hospital. Guess what? That's not what we're discovering in some other countries. Here in the United States, if you end up in the hospital for almost anything, have your appendix out, get a broken leg, be in an accident, almost anything, and they find out you're not vaccinated, the first protocol is to give you a test to see if you might have COVID-19, Omicron, even if it doesn't seem to be demonstrating any symptoms. And they're incentivized not only to discover if you've got it, but then to put you through as many protocols as possible because of the kickbacks that are involved with their system. So, friends, how much of this do we really have? As you look around the world, the dramatic differences in the way that the statistics are reported is suspicious, at least, maybe even controversial at best, as to how we're counting the numbers. Now, one of the nations you need to follow because they're on the cutting edge of this all the time is, of course, the nation of Israel. And in the last days, the nation of Israel is where the eyeball of the world is focused. And that's going to be happening even more in the coming days as the tensions ramp up over there, as it looks like an impending war is on the steps. Oh, friends, it's coming. But in the meantime, this week, Naftali Bennett actually has, in the past couple of weeks, been getting on Twitter, and he's been getting in front of his policymakers saying, we have a problem here in Israel. Remember, they're one of the first countries to vaccinate almost all their population. They've had their COVID spikes a couple of different times, but right now they are having their highest spike ever with COVID. The Omicron variant has blown through every defense. And Bennett says that up to 40% of their population will be infected with Omicron. It's already quadrupled over there, and it seems to be going out of control. It's hard to even get a test. So many people want to be tested for it in Israel. And they are one of the first nations to promote the idea that perhaps a fourth shot of that same vaccine we've been taking might actually help. But yet, some medical professionals are warning, wait a minute, you can't just keep pumping the same vaccine into people. You do not know the side effects this may have on your own immune system. It may compromise you to the degree that you may be open against other diseases that you wouldn't have normally picked up. You see, this idea of a fourth booster, even though they said, well, it will be partially effective and might keep you from severe disease, might keep you from death. Yet in these countries, we are seeing the same thing. Here's what's happening in Israel. People getting Omicron, people in the hospital with Omicron, even some of the few that are passing away from Omicron, because it's not nearly as deadly as Delta and some of the previous variants. Guess what? They're vaccinated. The vast majority are vaccinated. We're still being fed the idea in the United States that, look, get the vaccine, because it's going to help you against Omicron, even though it's already been demonstrated that it doesn't do very much at all against Omicron. What's this about? It's all about the money, friends. It's all about the money. Because you see, Big Pharma runs everything right now. Big Pharma has put up certain cures and certain new medicines that are supposed to help with this. If you use one of theirs, you're okay, even though the science may be a bit shaky behind it. But don't suggest that you should use one of these other medications that doesn't have a patent, it's old tech or something else, and they won't be getting a bunch of bucks out of it. Oh, my friends, that's what's dangerous. That brings us to one of our other really bad headlines of this week. Patients arriving for appointments early in the morning after the FDA's action discovered they could not have their monoclonal antibody treatment. This was particularly bad in Florida. The FDA decided they would pull two of the three major antibody treatments out there. Listen, some of these, I've got church members that got COVID and had this monoclonal antibody treatment, and was great. They recovered very nicely from the infection. Yet now all of a sudden the FDA has decided we're going to pull this. You can't do it anymore. What kind of lawlessness is this coming out of Washington that now you're going to take a proven effective drug treatment and pull it from the market? And the whole idea was, well, it's not as effective against Omicron. Well, what happens if you have Delta instead? How are you going to be treated for that? Well, it doesn't matter. We're not going to make this available. But now there's this new pill that Pfizer has and this new pill that Merck has. And, try this. I know there's just a few studies out. It's brand new on the market, but we need some test subjects. Why don't you take this pill? Let's see what happens. Friends, listen, this is what's going on in our country, and it is crazy. It is so crazy that nobody seems to get it. But friends, it's all about the money. That's where it is. And if you aren't towing the line of their narrative, then friends, they won't even let you talk about it, won't let you raise questions about it. Friends, this was made evident in an interview with the new Surgeon General of the state of Florida when he talked about something that's unprecedented, a government from the top, from Washington, that's now saying that you as a medical professional can't have the freedom to prescribe what you think is going to help your patient, because we're going to be pulling these particular treatments. And if you dare to try to go around us and treat your patients with something that we don't totally approve of, we're going to scandalize you. Maybe make sure that local licensing agencies pull your license, or that your hospital fires you. Friends, don't you dare cross us, because, friends, ultimately, it's all about the money. It's where political contributions come from. It's why we've got people who served on the board of Pfizer that then serve on the FDA, and on the FDA and the CDC that then go to the boards of Pfizer, and back and forth. Because, friends, the connectedness here is just scary. Many of those who weren't connected are some of those who have resigned, worked for our FDA for years and years, some of the top vaccine people who've walked away and said, this is not right. Friends, what's happening? It's a fulfillment of the prophecy of Jesus when lawlessness takes over. And what's the motivation behind lawlessness? It's who's going to make the money. Friends, big pharma vaccines have discovered now that they don't have a lot of effect, but yet they still want you to put these into your body. Well, what about those competing vaccines? You do realize we've got a number of them out there that aren't from the big three. Well, who are they? They're vaccines like the one that was developed at Baylor with absolutely no royalties or patents on it, so it could be made available around the world at little or no cost. What happened to that one? Well, nobody wants to deal with it. Why? Because they don't make the money. Novavax, from the little company here in Maryland in the United States, has developed a tremendous vaccine that on paper looks better than anything the other three have out there. I've been waiting to see when that one's going to be released, yet over and over again, delays, delay this, delay that. Well, now some of you in other parts of the world, if you're in India, in Australia, it's just now being opened up. In many other parts of the world, Novavax is available. The WHO has already approved it. What about the United States? It seems like that paperwork trail gets slower and slower. And if it's ever approved, let me ask you a question. Do you think it'll be available? I've been asking that question. I've walked into, in the past week, several different pharmacies, and I asked, exactly how soon will you be able to have Novavax once it is approved? And I've gotten the same answer from everyone I've talked to this week. Well, there's little expectation that we'll even get it. See, we've already got the others. You want Moderna? We got that. Even Johnson, that single shot that now has been banned in some countries because it's shown to be not only so ineffective, but in some cases has some bad side effects. Oh, we'll give you the Janssen vax. We'll especially give you the Pfizer vax. We love Pfizer. Pfizer's big deal. And we love Pfizer. They sponsor a lot of stuff for us. Now, we're not sure we want to even have Novavax. Really? What if you've got some people who've been so suspicious of these mRNA vaccines and they don't want to take it? They've looked at some of the side effects that have already been published, even though you try to hold that news down. And they say, well, no, I would take Novavax. Well, that's fine. You will have to fly to another country if you want to take Novavax. Isn't that scary? What is all that about? I'll tell you what it's about. It's all about the money, my friends. Who controls the purse strings in this country? And you'll find out who controls the purse strings when you find out just how far videos like this actually go in some of the mainstream sources. Sometimes they're pulled, sometimes they're yanked, because we're talking about things that people are uncomfortable with, revealing the truth. And the truth isn't always what needs to be heard from their perspective. Oh, friends, I don't know about you, but this whole thing has been politicized from the beginning. And that's been confirmed to me just this past week by yet another article from Victor Davis Hanson that appeared in the Epoch Times in their opinion page. Because when you follow the money trail, it goes much deeper than just the pharmaceutical companies you see on the surface right now. Listen to what he says. From the moment that COVID-19 appeared, the pandemic became inseparable from politics. Political frenzy was inevitable since the SARS-CoV-2 virus may have escaped from a level 4 security virology lab in Wuhan, China. The rapid-fire spread soon threatened to indict the Chinese Communist government for nearly destroying the world economy and killing millions. Western elites, in response, feared that their own lucrative investments in China would be jeopardized by such disclosures and acted accordingly in defending Beijing. Nonetheless, one scenario that remains intriguing is that the escaped virus was birthed by gain of function research scientists overseen by elements of the Chinese Communist military. Worse, the lab was given subsidies by the U.S. health authorities routed through third parties, hiding all of that damaging information, warped government policy, and media coverage. I can tell you that I agree with everything he said so far because I've followed the trail all the way back to the University of North Carolina here and all the way through Dr. Fauci's office. Yeah, the same guy that did all the ugly experiments with the monkeys, with the beagles, the poor dog, Snoopy, my goodness. All these awful experiments they're doing on animals, no conscience whatsoever, lies in front of us over and over again. Why are we still paying this guy a salary bigger than that of the President of the United States to keep him in front of certain media outlets spouting a different line every day? I don't know. All right, back to the article. Hansen writes, belatedly, a panicked China shut down all domestic travel in and out of Wuhan, but not flights abroad to Western Europe and the United States. Well, the rest is history. From the outset, the World Health Organization simply spread false talking points about the outbreak from the Chinese government, delaying a robust global response. President Donald Trump's political opponents initially told Americans to shop and travel as usual. You remember that, or have you forgotten? Then came a sharp pivot as the cases mounted, and then they blamed the president for it. The U.S. 2020 ban on travel from China was met with charges of racism and xenophobia from presidential candidates. Ironically, many were simply channeling the racist and xenophobic China's propaganda. Many doctors kept hammering the need for therapeutics, including taboo off-label use of cheap generic drugs. The use of some of those I can't mention on a couple of the channels I'll be on, okay? You can fill in the blanks. This was widely ridiculed, despite continuing studies from abroad attesting to their usefulness. Trump's Operation Warp Speed project to develop vaccinations was also pilloried. Candidates Kamala Harris and Joe Biden did their best to talk down the safety of the impending inoculations. But once in power, they projected their own prior harmful rhetoric onto the so-called anti-vaxxers. Then they claimed credit for the initial success of the Trump vaccinations. Now, hang on. You want to keep following the money trail? Listen to this next paragraph closely. Pfizer had promised a major pre-election announcement about its likely rollout of a vaccine in October, just days before the 2020 election. Then, mysteriously, Pfizer claimed the vaccine, in fact, wouldn't be ready before November the 3rd. A few days after the election of Biden, the company reversed course and announced the vaccinations would be available. Friends, follow the money. You'll see exactly what's going on. And as we look at this terrible trail of evidence showing us that lawlessness has taken over even in our medical profession today, there's also not only the trail of money, but even the trail of bodies. As every single week I run into another article about some family fighting to get their loved one treated for COVID-19 who's landed in the hospital and unfortunately looks like they're going to die. They've been placed on a ventilator, not given the proper treatment, denied access to their family, sometimes their pastors to pray for them, and just put into a death spiral. The percentages of people who actually survive after being put on a ventilator in the United States are so low that it's scary for any developed country. Now, the main line coming from those who want to continue the narrative is, but they're only got on that ventilator when they were so far gone, there was nothing else you could do for them. That's why so many of them die. I don't believe that's the case after following dozens of those cases through the hospitals and the cases of some of those who've been able to, sometimes through court orders, get their families finally treated or pulled out of those hospitals. It seemed like they were not treating their family members properly, and then see them turn around. Friends, we live in a society where today lawlessness continues to be deadly. from the fact that we have allowed lawless criminals without bail, without bond, to be put back on the streets and who have killed people as they've not been properly prosecuted or jailed. From that to the fact that we have even incentivized a medical plan that sometimes puts people's lives at risk, even in our own hospitals. Friends, it's only a fulfillment of what Jesus told us will be happening in these last days. It is the time of lawlessness beginning, the time in which we have several of these political operatives in places, including our own White House, who seem to have no reason, no logical background for why they are throwing the laws of their own countries out the window and instituting a new totalitarian regime. These tin horn dictatorships are just a part of the rise of a worldwide beast, the great reset that is coming, that they're talking about with the folks at Davos right now. Yes, the conference will be later, but they're doing it all via Zoom right now, and talking about how those people who are in control, who already run the world, who are already the millionaires and billionaires who pull all the purse strings, are ready to take everything away from you so that you can own nothing, but you'll be happy. Well, we'll see about that. If it's going to come to that, we're going to have to get like those terrible books that kind of prophesied where we're going today, like Brave New World or 1984. We're going to have to end up with a soma pill, something to knock everybody out to make them think everything's rosy, even though it's not. But I wouldn't say that's too far out of the way to predict, because when Jesus returns, he's coming back to a world that's in total rebellion, a world that's so messed up that I think we'll be crying out with the Apostle Paul at the end, with the Apostle John at the end of the book of Revelation. Even so, Lord Jesus, come. I'll see you tomorrow as we have the message from First Baptist Church, Winnsboro, South Carolina, and each and every day as we wake up in the Word. Come join me.